kick off this whole conversation, going back to the early days, maybe let's go through your upbringing, share a bit where you grew up, what was the environment like, and then we'll walk from there.
No problem. Thank you for having me, Jacob. So I mean, if we take it back, I pretty much grew up in an impoverished neighborhood named Flemington Park. There's different walks of life everywhere, but that area was really tough during that moment in time when I grew up there, and opportunities were limited. The chance of getting yourself into some serious trouble was very high. A lot of the times, the term life on the streets, you really live it there, and you spend a lot of time on them, unfortunately, you're forced into doing things you know are not right, but in order to just get by and get through. And so it was a tough upbringing. I grew up with my little sister, and my mom and dad had an on and off marriage in the beginning. And
immigrants, or they were also from here?
They're both born in Greece, and so they're immigrants. They came here, had us here. Spent a little bit of time in Greece when I was a baby. Came back, and settled in the Flemington Park area, like many immigrants did at that time. When I was young, I think I was about 14 years old. My father got really ill with cancer. And that took a bad situation and made it worse, right? He was sort of my Superman, my hero, and they're supposed to be indestructible,
right?
And he wasn't indestructible, and that was sort of a humbling experience, and tough to overcome, and that kind of sent me spiraling into a path I probably wouldn't have chosen had I had the right guidance and structure at home, I guess, right? But I'm one of many stories like that. But the issue is how do you overcome that with very limited guidance, not to their own fault, but my parents didn't even speak English for the most part when I was younger. So every problem I had, even trying to do school, I had no one to go to, right? I was the older brother. My little sister, I gave her some guidance as I worked my way through it and tried to figure things out on my own. But essentially, I was alone. And when my father passed away, my mom had to have 3 jobs, like many immigrants working in our country today. One job couldn't cut it, so for her to put food on the table and a roof over her head, she unfortunately had to work 3 jobs. When we were younger, we were on social assistance and that sort of thing. No choice. Again, she was a single mom for the most part. And
what was that like? Kind of losing your father at an early age. The older brother, son of an immigrant, almost like kind of the leader of the pack in that kind of family. What was that doing to your mental state of mind when you were growing up, all that responsibility you had from a very young age?
It's a very good question, and I think it forms part of the DNA of where I've come today at the early stages, because there was no choice, right? It was, my father said a lot of things to me. I still say I'm lucky today because it wasn't a sudden passing. He was sick, and he was sick for about 18 months and battled through, and they only gave him 6 months to live, and so there was many sit downs we had, and he prepped me for it as best as he could and said, you're gonna need to take care of your mother and your sister now, and always take care of them, be there for them. I won't be there, and it was a lot of responsibility on a 16-year-old kid to deal with when he passed, and I had to figure out a way to get out of that neighborhood, basically, and that was the only way to do it. There was no living there and staying there. I decided would not have led to a proper outcome, and so the main goal, and everyone should have goals in life, and it leads to that, is get out first of all and give yourself a chance, right? And
was there a moment that was like kind of I've had it, like I gotta make a change with my life, with my family life?
Yeah, there was a couple. And the first thing that made me realize that I will never have a fair shake if I stayed there was, like I mentioned, unfortunately I had to turn to sort of some gang life and some things like that you probably wouldn't want to raise your kids doing, but you just get consumed with your surroundings sometimes. And the one thing was when, unfortunately, as a junior, I had a little bit of a record and in and out of the court system and things like that. And at one point in my life, I had a suspended sentence and I needed to find employment. Otherwise, face the music, right? And I tried desperately to find a job, and I went to interview after interview, mainly at the Don Mills Shopping Center, which was before it is what it is today, and there was a lot of stores over there. And I'll never forget, I went to 3 interviews that almost had the identical result, and that mall caters to sort of the more well-off that live sort of closer to Lawrence, and then towards Eglinton is where Flemington Park was, is sort of the second half that it caters to. And they kept looking at my resume and asking where my street was, and it was a street called St. Denis, and they said, is that in Flemington Park, or is that closer to this side? And every single time without fail, when they found out I was from that neighborhood, they didn't want anything to do with me. So I did amazing on the interview, wasn't enough, right? You come from the wrong side of the tracks, we're not going to give you the opportunity. So that was the first, but to your point, it was.
But so quick question about that, like, so you faced a point where nothing to do with your skills, nothing to do with your abilities, you've been turned down just because you were on the wrong side of the tracks.
Correct.
What is that like? What was the thought process and the conclusion you came to? Instead of kind of going to the point where I'm discriminated because I'm from that side of the tracks, to I gotta move because otherwise I wouldn't have a chance.
Yeah, I think the only way. I definitely felt that it was a systemic issue there too, and not giving. When you have very little and all you have is an ambition to try to get out and try to not even necessarily get out, but just do better for yourself and stay in the neighborhood. There's nothing wrong with the neighborhood, but if it's the only way you can make a difference sometimes is to get out and then help looking in. And even to this day, I try to help as many initiatives as I can. Some of them in that area, and where I can, I do go back and try to help and do those types of things. But it was an impossible fight. Sometimes you have to know when to fold them, like they say, and it wasn't going to work out if I kept getting that response. It's really tough on the ego. It's tough on you, and you're already dealing with so much, and to get turned away just based on where you grew up is not right. And so anyway, that was a bit of a challenge for sure, and that continued on. A little bit later in life, when I was still trying to get out of that neighborhood and went to college and had an opportunity in a co-op position to work for a financial institution, one of the big 5, and again, all my classmates went in and got a job, and on the second day there, a couple guys in a suit came and pretty much walked me out of the building and said, look, you have pending charges and that sort of thing, so unfortunately you won't be able to continue here. And my college at the time was not supportive and saying, well, I guess that's the end of the program for you. And I had already gone through the first 3 years. This is the last stage. So I was lucky. I had all through it. You need someone to believe in you. And when you get that chance or opportunity, you got to jump on it. Everyone gets opportunities, and I don't like it when people think they don't. Every single human will get a opportunity. It's always it looks differently. It's not always looking the same way, but you got to just jump on it. And there was an opportunity that came out of nowhere. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but I was able to fulfill the co-op requirement and move on. So I got that chance and jumped on it immediately and did the best that I could, and ended up getting a full-time job out of it afterwards. But it would have never happened if we didn't have a chance, right?
So first of all, it's a phenomenal point, and I think a lot of people kind of miss that opportunity that they've been given. Kind of remind me of the story about the rabbi that falls off the boat, and another saving boat comes over and he said, no thank you, God will save me. And then another one comes and said, no thank you, God will save me, and then you end up drowning. And that was kind of your way to catch whatever boat that was coming. You just didn't want to miss that opportunity. So I think that, in your case, it's phenomenal you were able to recognize that from the position you were at.
I think that's a good point, and you have to recognize them and execute when you get a chance, and that will open up others, right? They start to quickly forget where you're from, when you deliver, right? And you just need that first chance sometimes. And then the second defining moment, you asked earlier on what sort of changed me. It was a very, I'll never forget this day, and it was unfortunately, again, I was a young offender, and I was in a bail hearing, and it wasn't my first rodeo, and my mother's unwavering support and love and affection, even though she was working 3 jobs, even though she wasn't there as much as she would have liked, she never, ever, ever gave up on us, right? Especially me particularly, never, no matter what I did. And I had many friends that were in the same boat as me, where their parents gave up on them, kicked them out to the streets, and said, you're not living here, and never showed up to their hearings, and just, you're a problem, you're a lost cause. And unfortunately, the way most of those people I'm referring to now have already passed away, or they're serving long sentences in correctional facilities. And I really believe the main difference is my mother never, ever, ever gave up, ever. Even though, no matter what I did, she was right there in the front row supporting me. But that day she broke down, and that day enough was enough, and she was basically pretty much on the floor crying. And the judge seen it, and just kind of, he didn't have to say anything. He just looked at me and said, kind of shook his head like, I can't believe you're doing this to this lady. And that was the moment. I said, you'd never see me in here again, and just give me one more chance at bail, and never will I go back. And that's pretty much what happened. I decided I can't. She worked such a hard life, an immigrant coming here, and if I told you the jobs, they were not glamorous at all, and did all of that for us to have a chance and to have an opportunity. And I'm gonna just take it and throw it in the garbage. I mean, I'm very much killing my own mother. And I wasn't prepared to do that, and I think those are the 2 big ones that resonate.
Made it clear.
20 plus years later. Yeah, definitely.
What a moment! I can only imagine. And
It was
kind
tough.
of, going back to the point where you went to I guess you made that pivot and you decided I want to pursue the change. I guess gang life was not really accustomed to promoting education. And so how was that, like, from the moment you made that change to pursue better education? I'm assuming schools was not your, forte at the time. How was that, how was that transition from all the way to become CFO with all the degrees and designated that comes with it to where you were, I want to say, like 15 or so years ago?
Well, it was, so you're right. The educational part of it, I mean, I always, because I had to figure it out on my own, I always ended up, I think it made me better down the road on figuring it out on my own, because I didn't have the support later as well. So I had to do a lot of it on my own, and I became very good at figuring things out on my own because of it, because of the environment I was in. So it was tough. I'm not gonna lie, I went to multiple high schools. I've been expelled numerous times, but every time I got expelled and went to a different school, I ended up getting A+ on all my courses and finishing a year. And then I'd come back to my home school, and unfortunately it's that same environment, and you get into the same issues, and then you're kicked out again, and I'd go to another school. And so this was happening not on a yearly basis, but almost on every semester basis pretty much. So I went to several high schools, more than half a dozen, but didn't miss not even half a year. I graduated with my peers at a different school, but I still graduated when I was supposed to, still tried to apply for college. And did, and still made my way through. So I think the key there is just don't give up. It was very easy for me to give up because I'm not going to be with my friends anymore and say, forget it, I'll just stay home and play video games, and I'll go get a job, and that's enough for me, right? And it goes, you're pretty much putting a limit on yourself when you do stuff like that. And I always say that you really shouldn't limit yourself, but that's exactly what I would have done. Is just limit my opportunities, and I wasn't prepared to do that. I wasn't prepared to change yet fully, but I wasn't prepared to
give up.
To give up completely. I needed to at least get my high school education because I knew I didn't want to live that life, right? And unfortunately, how do you get out of a neighborhood like that if you're in that environment? You have to make some money, and maybe you're not making it in the right ways, but make it be used for the right things. And basically that's what it was. My mom did an incredible job saving up money for our first down payment. I chipped in what I could, and we moved out, right, and got our own place, and went to a neighbor in Scarborough, which isn't a whole lot better, but was a lot better than where we were.
And what does that do to, your psychology as a kid, or your, kind of the way you think about the world, where you coming into a new environment every semester, basically, new kids, potentially new friends or new enemies? Like, how do you look at the environment where you constantly changing?
So the one, another good point. You've been on a roll today, but another good thing that came of that is I was a much more reserved, believe it or not, even though I was living that sort of life and it was a little wild at times, and being out all night and those types of things. I was still a little bit more reserved and uncomfortable in new surroundings and those types of things. But what that forced me to do was deal with that issue. And you're coming to a new environment, you have to meet new people, you have to integrate, and you have to find a way to navigate through that experience. And it was just each one I started to see as an experience, and then you start to create your own playbook on how to deal with those experiences. So later in life, those values paved the way for a lot for me on not being scared of something new, or not understanding taking on a new initiative or a new risk, because everything was a new risk and a new chapter in my life back then, right? So it was that's pretty much
right. So basically, you guys managed to get out of the neighborhood with money that you guys saved as a family. I guess showcased a new path. College was starting then, I guess?
Yeah, college started when I was still kind of in the old neighborhood. It transitioned to our new place, but we couldn't, I always had ambitions to do something in real estate even back then. We couldn't afford to send me to university or, to go to Schulich, and, I always had a dream to get a degree one day and maybe do those things, but it just wasn't going to be possible with where I was then. But I decided early on, and I've given that advice to many of my younger cousins and things like that, is sometimes you just got to figure out what you want to do, and then maybe attack it a different way, right? So maybe I can't afford it, but if you get yourself into a company, even if it's at the very bottom of the totem pole in that company, but if it's the company doing what you want to do in the industry you want to be in, and your effort is there, you'll find a way, and the rest will figure itself out. And I know it's very vague to say that, but that's essentially what happened. I didn't have a job in real estate in the beginning. I decided, okay, what's the most cost-effective way to even get my foot in the door? That was to become a realtor, and it's not very expensive to do it. Put a little bit of effort in, and I got my license, and so I got a taste. But I was working in a different position. I was working in an electronics manufacturer, was the co-op position that turned into a real job. Then I was working in the movie production sort of industry, just in finance as a junior, right here downtown, not in real estate. And then opportunity came knocking, through a recruiter who's done well for me over the years, and so he, I believe they're on this board.
Right.
He found this opportunity and said, "Look, you'd be a great fit." One of the owners at the time owned the Toronto Argonauts, and you love sports, and they want someone that can help sort of manage that side of the business on paper anyway. And of course it's real estate, but they want the investment background that I was working on at school, and they want of course financial analysis, which is what I did in my last two jobs, and again entry level, right? And so I said, no problem, let's give it a shot. And what I'll never forget my fourth or fifth interview, when I was meeting with one of the founders, who's my boss today. He said to me, it's between you and somebody in their mid-40s who's already designated, already has all this stuff. That's a big difference. What makes me believe in you versus them? And I was only 24 or 25 at the time, right? And I basically said, because I don't think, if anything could be humanly possible, I'll find a way to do it. And no matter what I have to do, no matter, you just have to find a way to deliver. And if I can't deliver, that means it just can't be done. And I'll tell you that. And he said, so you think you can go and get your CPA while you're trying to learn this business and do that in the evenings, and you want to start a family, and I said, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And if you give me the chance, I'll prove it to you. And he kind of chuckled and said, you know what, let's go with him and let's give it a shot. And he believed in me. And he did do exactly what he said, right? He paid for my education. I wouldn't have had my CPA without him. He went on to pay for my degree that I also needed at the time. And a funny little story on that as well. We were in Miami once, later after my tenure was, a few years in, and had dinner since we were both there at the same time. And I remember him saying, "What's next?" And I said, "Well, I think I want to have some kids next. I think that should be next." And he said, "That's not good. There's got to be something else you can do to buy." Basically, he was trying to buy some more time, right? And said, "Look, I see the potential in you, but we have an incumbent CFO. How do I keep you here in the fold for a little while longer while developing yourself?" And turns out he wanted to have me pursue my MBA, and that was going to be a couple more years worth of courses. And of course, he was willing to pay for it as a company. And again, I said, "Fine, it's another challenge. It's
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. Works for you, works for me." And I think it's important. Like I said before, right? You get these small opportunities. The very first one comes along, and it may not mean anything at that time,
Right.
but you got to know which ones to take. And if you're in an environment where there's not many, just take it,
Right.
and make the best of it, and that'll hopefully turn into 2 others, and then you pick which one's best of those 2, and then that'll turn to 4 others,
Right.
and you just keep navigating that way. And I think in
And
the
he
end,
had that kind of wisdom or sense of ability to achieve things from an early age, or was that something that you just you didn't have any choice, so you had to go for whatever you got?
Yeah, I mean, you really, believe me, your choices are few in that environment. I mean, you can't, you really, it gets hard on yourself too. One of the few kids that come to school and don't even, my mom would never ever leave me without a lunch, never, right? Like she would have to do what she can, but you're the only kid that can't go across the street and grab a pizza because you don't have any money. And you just the little things, it weighs on you mentally, right? But you got to harness all that and say, these are all the reasons why I'm going to do better, and it's going to motivate me now. I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I'm not going to sit here and just accept it. This is a reminder of why I have to try hard every single day. And I don't believe, you need a little bit of luck, but I don't believe you can do anything right without hard work. There's been many examples, whether it's Richard Branson or whoever. You guys know all the stories. All those guys have done much better than I could ever even dream of, but they worked hard. You can't say anything about it. They could have been terrible at school, but when they had the right idea, they had to execute and push it through and have that right character, and they did, right? And you can't do anything without hard work. There's no easy way.
Right.
Not the way I believe.
Right.
Some people get it a little easier, but.
So question kind of on the point that you've touched, but you versus, the environment of the other kids. So how was it like, coming where you came from, the environment you grew up in, and then meeting the other side of the world with, meeting kids at college, or even going to the workplace that you right now have, or the other workplaces that you have? I'm assuming not a lot of people share the same background and shit.
Right.
So how was the transition?
The challenge, there's 2 parts of it, but like the challenge of it is it's hard to see what others have sometimes. So even when you're at school and you don't have lunch, but it goes at a higher level as you get higher in college, and you see what programs they're able to go to, and they don't have to work 3 jobs to pay for their tuition. Somebody else just paid for it. Don't worry about it. Like, you have to know how to not be envious and just play the hand you're dealt, right? Like, that's not my hand, and I needed to understand that and not be angry at them because they have a better upbringing, and still treat everyone with the same respect, and we're all the same, and try to play that part, and I think it goes a long way, instead of being bitter, that they have something. So I was able to establish some relationships early on that are still great relationships today because of that, and not looking down at people and that sort of thing. So that part of it is the first part of it. I think you take it later on, when I became an analyst, at some point in my early years, I got to see everybody's salary, right? Because I was in finance, and it's hard to sit there and, you put in 12, 13-hour days sometimes, and you look up and you see other people making 3 times what you're making, and that sort of thing. And you got to separate that. You got to be able to separate that and just look at everybody on an equal playing field as much as you can, right? And I think that's that was the hardest part to accept. But the second part I was going to tell you is actually a benefit. And I think coming from an upbringing like that in a neighborhood like that, The one story I like to tell the most is you really know what the bottom feels like. Like I had friends living on the streets, right, and even family members like living on the streets at some point where they really had no home, so they were homeless, right? And you really, you know, the bottom is there. You know what the bottom is. Maybe I'm a little bit removed from the bottom, but it's right in front of me, right? You know, you can roll off the bed and you're on the bottom, right? I think many of my peers that didn't come from that upbringing, it's foggy in the bottom. They don't know what the bottom truly is, and there's a fear there of what if I take a chance, or what if I push too hard, or what if I do the wrong thing, or what if I invest in this and it doesn't work out and I end up at the bottom, my life is over. You just can't recover from the bottom. It's the unknown. And I think many of them are the same way. They look down and it's just foggy. They don't know what's down there and they're scared of it. And I had the advantage all through life so far that the bottom is the bottom, but you can get out of it. So I never worried about taking a chance or taking a risk, or, you know, you're not going to be reckless, but I'm certainly never afraid to not have a job or not be able to make my way, because I've been there before. And so that edge helped me a lot, for sure, down the road.
So, and you felt it kind of going, you know, to any work environment that you were unfamiliar with, you felt like you got that edge?
I think so. I think so. I mean, you start to go with your gut, and that's important to me, is always believe in your gut. Your gut sometimes doesn't necessarily understand what's risky and what's not. It just tells you what it thinks is right. But sometimes the right move is the riskiest move. And so having, you know, the ability to bounce back or not worry about the worst case scenario, because that'll just be a new environment again and I'll just build up again if I have to, right? Helps. Now, I'm not saying I became an entrepreneur where I started investing in, you know, all these different companies and took high risk and all these types of things. And certainly I know people that have, and I think they have that same element that I had. They just chose to do things that way. But I did make some risky decisions in life later, and you know, they all paid off, and if they didn't, I know exactly what I had to do if they didn't, right? So it was never a worry for me, right?
What you know, what is very clear in your story is that you faced many challenges, you know, throughout your life, but the state of mind that you had, you basically converted those challenges to your advantages, and all of them were basically a stepping stone for the next phase, and the ability to overcome them gave you more confidence to deal with the next to come effectively. My question is, you know, looking backwards, you know, you're now, you know, executive in one of the largest real estate companies in Canada. Was that a vision of yours, or was that kind of every day at a time?
I think oddly enough and ironically enough, it's almost like building a house or a building. You build the foundation first and you go from the ground up type of thing. I think it wasn't intentional at the time, but I think a lot of what I had to go through ended up forming the foundation for me. And, you know, once I was able to get out of the foundation and, you know, we come out of the ground, we call it, and we get our sort of, to start building our above grade, it's the same thing. Once you're above, you can look back and say, okay, you know what, all this helped me, and I'll take these values, and this is what's working, this is what's not, and you have your foundation, right? And then it's the same thing, the next level, so college, and then you get into the workforce, and every level before me, I think, the one ability that I try to give myself a little bit of credit for is I always try to learn from the people above me. And it's not always learning and just following what they do. You have to be able to differentiate between what is good and what is not for me, right? So everybody's got their own style. So I try to squeeze out just the good in everybody that was sort of, you know, my mentors coming through this whole thing. And I think getting their good out of them, plus the foundation that I had, I think helped me build the character that I have today, and you know, the resilience and all those things you can learn through experience. But you need a little bit more than that. You need some mentorship, and that's why I think it's very, very important in how we give back now and give those people coming after us the same opportunities, the same guidance, and those types of things, so they can build their foundation and their next floor, right? It's not just about yourself. You want to help the next generation as well, right?
And when you're looking at the next generation, whether they're coming from more challenging backgrounds or less, what do you think is the prominent message to them? Because right now we got a fully mature industry. A lot of the big companies are there for many years. We got massive institutions. What would be your message for a kid that want to participate in this industry and not really have the confidence to take that step?
I think the industry is a very large one. I mean, it makes a big part of the GDP for sure, but there's so many subsegments of this industry. So I think the first thing to do is if you can get any kind of experience, even if it's volunteer experience in the industry, it would be a good first step. Just to understand, what is it that you like about the industry? What is it that you don't? I always preferred to go that route rather than spend 6 years in the classroom aiming to get to something, then you get there and you try it out and it wasn't what you wanted. And then now you're doing another 4 years or another 3 years and something else. So I'm not saying it's easy to get those chances, but there are opportunities, whether you want to be on the site itself or you want to get into an office. I think the most important thing is trying to sort out where you want to go and then start to map out what that means for you, right? So even if I'm a believer in when you're done high school, if you want to take a year, a lot of people say don't, because you lose that sort of ability to concentrate on the school and you lose it. I don't see it that way. I think if you take a year to actually get into the workforce, you can't take a year and go play video games. Right. But if you take a year and even if you're volunteering at a few different institutions, if you have that ability to, and your home structure allows that, and you can live without having to work, do it. And if you can do it at a minimum wage, even just to get that experience and to understand what you want to do, I think you come out of it far better. You burned a year, but it's not the money that you can make in that year that some people unfortunately think I'm going to save up that money and then I'm going to go and do university. Get the experience in that 1 year. Understand what you want to do, and then hone in on what it is that you want to do. And after that, once the game plan is set, it's rolling up your sleeves and it's all about hard work. You have to do it. And people recognize hard work. People know when you have their back. People really, it's hard to hold someone down once they have a path and they put their head down and want to work towards it. All walks of life, whether you came where I came from or you have other challenges, and there's many people that have different challenges. It's hard to suppress hard work. It really is. So
I'll say, I think most people, especially younger coming up, overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Right. And I think your story is a phenomenal example of one step at a time, hard work, making good decisions along the way, some bad ones at the beginning, but learning from them and adjusting, and then just executing and just working as hard as you can. And what is that? How long have you been with Tree before?
I'm on my 16th year now.
16th.
Yeah.
So 16th year, the journey started in a very different place.
For sure.
You're now the CFO of the company.
Yes.
You've had this year the biggest year you've had in the history of Tribute.
That's right. Oddly enough, through COVID, but it has been a banner year for us and many others out there. I'm assuming, but it's been a crazy year. Right.
And so what's next for Gus? What's next for Tribute?
For Gus, I think it's what I said before. When you get to the goal, you should always have other goals as well, right? So I have a few personal goals that outside of work and that I'm also working on. But I think your goals start to become more team oriented. So my goals now merge with the company. I kind of become the fabric of the company. Right. And I think we've always been one of the dominant players in the low rise space. I think in the high rise space we've gotten better every single project, every single year. And I think we need to become one of the dominant players in that space as well, if we're not already, but strive to be the best in that world as well. We're starting to look at purpose-built rentals. We finished our first one that's almost fully leased out already and broke ground on the second one. That's going to be a big part of our platform going forward as well. So my goals start to align with the company. When you get to sort of that point, you sort of work on that. But on the other side of the coin too is, I want to find the next Gus out there and give opportunities to the next people to grow them as well. Doesn't mean that they have to come and take my job in 5
Right.
years. If they can do it, great. I want that, but they just to grow them, and no one should be, you have 30, 40, 50 people in the department.
Right.
They're not all going to be CFOs at your company,
Right.
but they might all be able to grow and fulfill what they want to do. Not all of them want to be, right?
Right.
So you need to just get the most out of these people that you can, and give them the chance to grow. And it's all about growth.
Right. So what would you say to leaders or executives in your position today, looking at hundreds of resumes and doing a lot of interviews today? It's more challenging with social distancing, but what would you say? Al was very had a lot of courage to bet on a young kid with no education coming from the background it came, but I think it's very clearly it paid off more than any senior guy that he could have hired that by now probably would be retired.
Right.
What would you say to that guy that now sits in the position of power to make a decision of whether to bet on that kid?
I think you have to find a way to look past that, all the levels that are above that, and try to look past that and look at that particular candidate's foundation. And so when I'm interviewing somebody, I ask very different questions than most, right? I'm not looking for what was your best achievement and what was your biggest challenge and what was those are the standard questions, right? I'm asking different types of questions, and I'm trying to find out who they are, right? And what kind of character do they have? What kind of fit do they have? And the biggest key is don't try to turn off all the noise. Don't worry about where they're from or what their background is or what they like. None of that should matter, right? Everyone should have an equal chance. And if you're gonna err on one side, give that person a chance that you don't think would otherwise have a chance, and they will have so much more motivation to prove you right than picking somebody that is the cookie cutter response. This is an Ivy League guy, and he might be the guy. That's the easy way out to me.
Right.
And they're already where they think they are up here.
Right.
How much more are they going to give you? So bet on the underdog from time to time. I'm not saying make your next CFO somebody like that, but I was not hired as a CFO, right? But where you can give an opportunity to somebody that you wouldn't otherwise give one to, and let them surprise you. Now the onus is on them to show you what they can do. And I'm telling you, I think there's so much talent out there, untapped potential from people that just can't get a really good chance. And when they do, they're gonna hit it out of the park. And so our job is to find those men and women that can do that. And that's my message.
That's actually a great message to wrap this whole thing up. I think it was a phenomenal, conversation, and I'm privileged to know your story a bit better now. And I think all across the board, the message in Real Stories really that there is no shape or form to leadership, and there is a lot of great people out there that are looking for the chances. And I think it's our job as leaders today to allow that to happen, or even encourage that and look for that. So with that, I really want to thank Gus for being one of our first interviews for Real Stories speaker series. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I think you're doing a great initiative, and I hope it continues to spread the message. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.